Welcome to Indiana Sports Beat Radio, presented by Wow Food Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Know your role and shut your mouth, you jabroni!
Fires upfield into the end zone, and it's caught! Jelani Woods! Touchdown! ISB!
A 43-point night for Tyrese Halliburton.
How do you like that, partner?
Galloway drives all the way to the hole, throws it off, got it! And Indiana's got their first lead of this contest.
I mean, that's a goddamn Emmy winner right there.
Now, from the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios, here's your host, Jim Coyle.
Hello, everybody. Welcome aboard Indiana Sports Beat Radio, coming to you here on this Tuesday, October 24th. Thank you so much for jumping on board. Appreciate you more than you know. Big day coming up. Great lineup. Oh, my goodness. Mike DeCourcy, of course, from Big Ten Network and Sporting News. In the second segment, he'll be joined by Fran Fraschilla, former D1 basketball coach and ESPN analyst. Hopefully he'll stick around. Chronic Hoosier on the program today as well. Plenty to talk about. World Series action. One of the teams set, the Texas Rangers. And for the first time since 2011, I didn't even realize that they had been in back then. The Phillies and the D-backs are going to a Game 7 after the D-backs have now won. The Phillies had a 2-0 lead, man. And in Game 3, I remember talking to Seth Tao about this. They had a 2-0 lead, and they got walked off for the D-backs walked off with a single to win, to get onto the win column. The Phillies were just right there to going up 3-0. And then all of a sudden, things change. And now we're heading to Game 7. It is in Philadelphia. The Philly bats were quiet. Kyle Schwarber. Last night, you had a very, very unique occurrence. You had former Hoosier pitcher Andy Salfrank, pitching for Arizona to former Hoosier Kyle Schwarber, which was kind of cool. Not too many schools can say that, so congratulations to those guys. The Rangers going to their first World Series, like I said, and then, of course, now a big Game 7. I don't have a dog in the fight, but I guess I'd rather see the Phillies since you've got Kyle Schwarber going. But I guess you've got Andy Salfrank on the other side, but Schwarber plays more. But I don't have a dog in the fight. Lots more to talk about. J.J. McCarthy, he's coming up on the Heisman list, but that's I've got thoughts on that. Mike DeCourcy, I look forward to talking to him. He thinks that Marvin Harrison Jr. is the best player in college football, and we'll have a great conversation there. News for college football coming up in the bowl season. They are looking at implementing, and they will be implementing, coach-to-player communication, like in-game. I guess basically what they do in the NFL. You know, they're calling the plays in through a communication device in their helmet. And at first I'm like, man, I don't like that, but that goes along with the sign stealing. You don't have to worry about stealing signs anymore, which I guess you could be over there giving fake signs and seeing if they fall for that stuff. But meanwhile, you're just going, run the Swift left, Oxy right, Buster, Geronimo, Zing Zang. And then they'll look down on the wrist and do the abacus. Is that it's like an abacus on their wrist, and call the play. But so they're looking at doing that during bowl season as a trial run. How's everybody doing? Appreciate you being on the Andy Moore Honda hotline. Cody from Fort Wayne jumping on early and often. Fred, Easton, Pennsylvania. Kent from Mount Pleasant, Michigan. Las Vegas, Larry, of course. Las Vegas Larry just goes so easily. And Blackjack Larry could be a good one too. But but I like Las Vegas Larry. But it's whatever he prefers. Andy from Canton, Michigan. Donald from Georgia, but originally from Southern Indiana. Pete down in Cicero, my man Pete, finally back from the frozen tundra of Shakopee, Maine, or Minnesota. Jamie, Grand Rapids. Pete, or Forrest down in Georgia. Derek from Owensboro. Mike, 5 lefts on as well. Hope everybody's having a good day. Good start to your week. Looking forward to having Fran Fraschilla on. Unfortunate for him to be joining us. He'll be joining us with during Mike DeCourcy's second segment, which that should be fun. They're good old friends. So looking forward to that as well. What is on your mind? Indiana football, of course. Yesterday, Tom Allen met with the media. The coaches met with the media. And there's not a lot that really comes out of these pressers in my mind. I mean, it's on one hand, I'm like, what do we or people expect them to say? But it is a lot of the same old. I would at least find a different way to say the same old things if you're going to say the same old things. Now, Rod Carey, I feel a little bit bad for. I mean, he's kind of been thrust into a non-envious position, I guess you would say. You're taking over an offense that has been just completely discombobulated. You've had no continuity at all at quarterback, none. And you're going into week 8, or is it week 7? Going into week 7, I believe. Yeah.
No, we're in week 8 now, I believe. Either way, it doesn't really matter. But yeah, we're.
Well, I'm trying to think. What is Indiana's record? 2-5.
We're 2-5.
Okay, yeah.
It's actually week 9, considering they already have.
Right. That's what makes it confusing. I didn't have the record memorized. I couldn't remember if it was. I thought it was 2-5. So you've already played 7 games. You're over the halfway point. Now, he was the OC for one of those games, but it was against Michigan. And they were the only team offensively to lead Michigan after the first quarter. They were almost the first and only team to put double figures on Michigan. I forget who it was, the Omar Cooper, whomever it was, the receiver that caught a pass, scored, but his heel was out of bounds.
Well, they wouldn't have been the only team to go double figures. Minnesota scored 10 on them, but they would have been the first team to eclipse 10 points is what it would have been.
So Minnesota scored almost as many points against Michigan as they did against Iowa.
Yep.
That's another thing. Things not looking, fans are not happy in Iowa, as a matter of fact. And I get it. Winning is the all what matters. But winning ugly is okay if that's every now and again. But for Iowa fans, it has become the constant. And it is just, they're not, I don't think people are very happy. There's an article that I read that the title says, "What Kirk Ferentz is doing at Iowa isn't cute. It's disgusting." Ari Wasserman, I think, wrote that that was a 12. What was his final score of that game? 12-10, 22 total points scored in that game.
Yeah, it would have been if that one touchdown had been called back, it would have been 17-12. But yes, the final score was 12-10.
But you've got that going for you, which is not nice. Your son is your OC, which there's that added pressure because I'm not sure that a lot of the fans are fans of him being the OC. But it was bad enough that he had a clause injected into his contract that requires him to score, Iowa to score 25 points a game average. And I don't know if he gets fired at the end or what, but they're not coming. I mean, I don't know what they're averaging, and I'd have to pull it up, but it's probably close to half that. But they're going to make a bowl game, but that's not difficult when you're playing the schedule they play. Iowa gained 12 whole yards. So for Indiana fans, take a little solace here. Iowa gained an entire 12 yards of total offense in the entire second half against Minnesota. This is at home, by the way, against Minnesota. So, yeah, not good out there. So it's not just Indiana, and this is a program that has been led by a guy who has been uber successful, but he's always done it his way, kind of the Iowa way. Never been big on offense, but they have really just been offensively challenged here in the last few years, and especially when you make your son the OC, that's just, you're asking for trouble, personally. But Phillips says Iowa needs to average 36 points a game in the final 4 games just to average the 25 points a game for the season. Have they even scored 36 points in a game?
They may have come close against their FCS opponent. I'm going to go take a look and see. Because I do remember they had one game or two where they did just that.
Robert loves to troll on Indiana. He says, so getting beat by 30 is prettier. Well, Robert, it depends on who you're playing. If you're playing the number 2 team in the country that's favored to win the national championship, or someone along those lines that Indiana's schedule contains in the Big East, Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan, et cetera, as opposed to that weak-ass lineup in the Big Ten West, huge difference.
The only time Iowa has eclipsed 30 points or more was once this season against Western Michigan. They beat them 41-10. Their highest point total since was 26 points on Michigan State.
And this is not pick on Iowa Day. It's just a point of conversation. Derek says he saw when Iowa played Wisconsin, they never had an offensive possession in Wisconsin territory. Wisconsin is an okay team. They're an okay team. So, yeah. We've got to take a break. We've got lots more coming up. Of course, the great Mike DeCourcy is going to join us next. Fran Fraschilla in this hour as well. Later on, hopefully Fran Fraschilla can stick around, and Chronic Hoosier in the second hour. Lots more coming up. Glad to have you with us. We'll be back with lots more Indiana Sports Beat Radio high atop the 18th fairway of the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Wow Food Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
In the market.
All right.
Did I ever send this tweet out that I meant to send? I did not. Oh, I didn't finish it. Well, it's all going to pot, whether we like it or not. Boy, Robert, you just love to troll, don't you? What IU message board?
This
are
isn't
you
an IU
talking
message
about?
board. This is a radio.
Yeah, I don't
show.
even know what you're talking about, bro. I appreciate you listening. I truly do.
Yeah.
I believe he's a Michigan fan, but that's all cool. I'm glad to have you. Hello, Miss Remax. Cheryl Sizemore. Well, it's all going to pot, whether you like it or not. Yeah, if anybody has a business that would like to advertise, hello, Mr. Mike DeCourcy. How are you, sir?
I'm great, Jim. How are you?
Wonderful. Yeah, I just didn't want you to get caught off guard and think that I was trying to cut you out, cut your time. You never know. Some people are, I know you're not, but
I got that big ego, Jim. You got to watch out, man.
they're I know that's not you, but they're out there.
Here we go.
44040, the golf club at Eagle Point in Bloomington.
This segment is brought to you by Remax Advanced Realty, Indie Home Pros team by Cheryl Sizemore.
Now back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Wow Food Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio. Here on this Tuesday, it's October 24th. Man, that means we're a week away from November. Gee whiz. Not that I'm not thankful, but I am thankful we have the great Mike DeCourcy with us from the Sporting News and Big Ten Network. Hello, Mike. How are you, sir?
I am well, Jim. How are you?
Got your Sporting News sweatshirt on there.
There you
as
go.
Well, looks good. Looks good. Not that this has anything to do with much, but I just was talking about it because it's been a talking point. Iowa and, everyone, Indiana has just been what they've been in football. But Iowa is not, their fans are not happy over there at all. And you've got a guy that leads that program that has been uber successful for a long time. He's got his son set at OC, which that's probably never a good idea really to do. You're just asking for trouble. And then when they have to put a clause in his contract that you have to average X amount of points, and then just had one of our listeners point out, and I lost it, but I'll try to pull it back up. But they would have to average 36 points a game in their final 4 games to average 25 points for the season. But luckily for them, they play in the Big Ten West.
Yeah, but even at that, they scored 10 on Saturday against Minnesota. So
at home.
We cannot say, oh, gee, they're in the West, they'll be fine. I mean, that was supposed to be what happened in the Minnesota game. I'm not a super big fan of that approach generally. I think there are times, sometimes the son can outdo the father, or the daughter can outdo the mother. What you see out in San Francisco right now with Kyle Shanahan. His father was a very good football coach, but I don't think he was this good. So
Shanahan, everybody loves what he's doing.
Yeah, so sometimes it can happen, but not a lot of success for the Iowa offense. And I can understand if you're a fan. I mean, I can understand if you're a fan why you would be frustrated by that.
Then at Michigan, nothing. They're winning, so winning cures everything. But there's just always seems like there's a shark that's coming out of the water or whatever for them. It's like they've had this, all the stuff with Jim Harbaugh multiple times. You go back to when he was doing the traveling circus, when he took his team on the tour. to get out of the away from the practice rules. Which, you know what, if you're smart enough to find a way to cut around the corners, hey, I go ahead. But now you've got he's become the Bill Belichick of college football.
That's one way of putting it, given the articles that have been coming out in the last week. I thought Monday's article by Pete Thamel for ESPN was the one that was the most what's the word I'm looking for? The most enlightening, let's say, as of yet. I would suggest reading that article if you haven't already. In it are included allegations from other Big Ten universities, none that are named, but other Big Ten universities provided documents and information to Thamel and the ESPN team about the tickets that were purchased by a Michigan staffer
at 11 Big Ten schools.
Yeah, it's just, there's just no way to explain that away. And I guess maybe I shouldn't be surprised by anything on Twitter now, but I was enlightened again by the number of people that tried to rationalize that as if it were no big deal. And I don't understand, why would you spend thousands of dollars to buy tickets on the 45-yard line or thereabouts for people that, for other people to go to games that you can't attend because you're working at Michigan's football games? So why would you do that if it weren't a big deal, right? There's just no way for me to understand how that can be rationalized.
What I love is they had the right guy doing it. He was a former Marine who knew what he was doing. He didn't just buy tickets to, say, the Ohio State game. He bought tickets to both sides of the stadium. This was well thought out. There is video evidence as well of illegal technology being used in this. So this is starting to get deeper and deeper. And it just, I'm like, man, if you're already that good, and you have that talent, why put yourself in this position? And then for any coach to act like he doesn't know is complete and total BS. There's no way all of this stuff can happen and it be done without their knowledge, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be. There are multiple elements of this that are difficult to explain away. The expenditure, because the employee in question was earning, I believe, $55,000 a year thereabouts on his salary as a staffer for the Michigan football program. Now, again, these are all allegations. Want to make that clear. Nothing's been proven. These are all allegations reported by ESPN. But that's one that would be difficult to explain away. The expenditure with $55,000 to be spending thousands of dollars on. Remember, one of the interesting components about this was that the tickets were not purchased they were purchased in large part on third-party sites, secondhand market, whatever you want to call it. There are online ticket brokers out there where if you decide that you want to go see Michigan play Ohio State, you could probably get in the building. It may cost you a lot of money, but you don't have to worry about sold out so much in today's society. You just have to be able to and willing to spend the money. Well, in order to buy tickets on the 45-yard line for a Big Ten football game or thereabouts, that's not cheap for most of the games. You're going to have to spend some money. So the fact that this person was earning what he was earning and to then spend this much money on football tickets to games that he himself wasn't in position to attend is hard to explain away. It's just not one of those things that you can easily understand. It's not normal. Why do you? One of the things that was interesting to me, Jim, in reading Pete's story, was how much can be known about you, whether you're doing this or not.
Wow.
They were able to discover who bought those tickets, even though they weren't purchased from the university. They were purchased through third-party site, but they could still know. I would not have known that.
Scary, huh?
Not really affecting my life that much, but it is kind of like, wow, man. And that they could then go back, according to the article, and look at video surveillance of particular games and find the person located in that seat. And according to the article, the person in that seat was using a phone to film the sideline of one of the teams, pointing the camera of a phone into the sideline of an opposing team, theoretically. Because remember, you can't tell whether they're filming the game or the team or the cheerleaders or the band just by looking at that video. But you can say that that would certainly be one of the scenarios that is possible / likely by the virtue of where this person was pointing the camera. But the fact that they were able to go back and find the footage and say, that's the person in that seat, and that person is holding up a phone and possibly filming activity. That's amazing to me. I would never have known that was something that could be done. But it should give
It certainly gives me pause. Absolutely. And let's see, one of the things that really stood out is that he bought tickets on both sides of the stadium. There you go. Got Mike back. The funny thing is he had tickets on both sides of the stadium for the recent Penn State, Ohio State game. But through video surveillance, they found those tickets were not used because this story happened to break right before then. Oh, this seat's empty. He didn't even scalp them to get his money back. So, yeah, it's not fun. I'm not laughing because it's funny. To me, it's a very, very serious issue. Obviously, I'm like, damn it. You've got these teams that are already up there. And I know there's a lot of pressure to win. The Big Ten is sick and tired of being not the SEC, of winning a national championship. Jim Harbaugh has heard it for, 7 years that he lost to Ohio State. Well, now maybe we know why he's beaten them the last 2 years. I bet Ryan Day is not happy about that. But will the NCAA do anything about it? Because they have proven that when they have evidence, let's use Bill Self for an example. When they have evidence about things, they're able to just candidly ignore it and say, and
let me counter that by first pointing out that there's never in all my time covering college sports has been a case like this.
Right.
This is not what we ordinarily see. It's usually involved when we get them, whether it's Kansas basketball or any other. Most of the investigations that have gone on under NCAA authority, most of them have been involved in player procurement in some fashion. Right. Some have involved, a very few, but some have involved academic integrity on the campus of a particular institution. Some, a very small number, but some. But I have never seen anything quite like this that the NCAA's had to deal with. I have seen something similar in my experience as a journalist. I think I wrote very briefly about Deflategate. I think I maybe wrote 1 or 2 columns about the great investigation that Bob Kravitz did at when he was at Channel 13 here in Annapolis. I think he, that was one that would be somewhat similar to this, or Spygate, the investigation. Again, this is still just an investigative. I like to make sure people understand I am not convicting anybody. It's not my job to convict them. We're just discussing what's been reported. So, and the NCAA, I think it's pretty clear that there is an investigation of some measure into these allegations now. So they've never had anything quite like this. And so that's the first thing. And the second element of the Kansas one is really complicated, Jim. There are many elements of it that complicate it. First of all, there was the introduction of the IARP, which proved to be a colossal failure by the NCAA, the Condoleezza Rice Commission's idea. There was the one good idea it seemed they had, but in execution, it did a really poor job. It did not improve the process at all. It just made it longer and theoretically, I presume, more expensive. So I don't think that it did any good. And then there was, secondly, the fact that Kansas was presented as a victim by the federal government in some of the trials. So my argument at that point, when they got done with those trials, I said, okay, here's the thing. You think Kansas did some stuff wrong? Well, yeah, but the federal government just said they were the victim. So you're going to have a hard time pinning them down. People thought in 2017, 2018 that Kansas was in big trouble. And I kept saying, look, they can go into any court in the land now if the NCAA oversteps here and say, we're a victim. It says so right in this document that the federal courts provided. How can you call me the perpetrator if I'm the victim? So I always thought that the NCAA originally, when they charged Kansas, overreached. And I said that in a column that I wrote back then, because the overreach suggested to people that there was more going on than they were going to be able to comfortably prove based on the way those cases were handled in federal court against other people, not against Kansas. Kansas was presented as a victim. So there are multiple layers of complication that affected the Kansas case, and none of that will affect this case because, again, different sort of case, different people prosecuting it, so to speak. When it gets done investigated, it will not be the IARP. IARP, as far as I know, they've done their last case. They're done. So I would not use Kansas as an example of what won't or will happen to Michigan.
We've got to take a break. When we come back, the great Fran Fraschilla will join us. Looking forward to that. Talk some basketball, college basketball. Mike DeCourcy from the Sporting News and Big Ten Network with us now. Make sure you give him a follow and make sure you go to the Sporting News for their complete coverage in all of sports. Back with more right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Wow Food Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
We need more time. Man, that goes way too fast. And that's why you have great people like Mike DeCourcy who gives that other side that, as much as people don't want to see it, you have to acknowledge it. But yeah, the government gave Kansas a kind of out, but the NCAA doesn't have to do what they did, but they're going to. They're like, it's just so much easier.
For those who are still listening, one other element of that, Bill Self did get suspended for 4 games. They weren't big games, but he did get suspended. So there is that as well. What if
is he getting suspended for the season now? Is Michigan out of the Big Ten race?
I don't think we have that answer yet.
Man,
JJ McCarthy's is one of the Heisman Trophy stepping up. And I'm like, man, he's having a good year. But Michael Penix is still my guy. They had a rough game last week, but everybody has a rough game. Mike Penix is still my guy to win the Heisman.
Well, I don't have a
hasn't
vote,
had a rough game though. Is Michigan? They haven't had a. I mean, I know they haven't really had an opportunity to have a rough game.
They haven't played anybody.
But they haven't had a rough game though.
And they've
when Washington did have a rough game, they played against a nobody.
And they've also had 007 on the sidelines of every game. So maybe that's they stole all of Indiana's. They stole all of Indiana's signs. That's how they beat Indiana 52-7. I was hoping to God I could see that they sent him to Indiana. I'm like, if they send him to Indiana, I'm gonna die. I'm like going, man, you should be able to send your. I hate to say it, but
Jim. They would have only won. They would have only won 42-7 if they hadn't.
Exactly. Exactly. Mr. Fran Fraschilla, how are you, sir?
Outstanding. As I finish down a grain bar.
Hit her up.
I'm good. Ready to go.
You're in Dallas, right?
Nope. We are now residents of the state of Colorado Springs.
Oh wow, the Springs.
Last couple of years, love it. God's country.
I can only imagine. Home of the Professional Rodeo Cowboys Association.
It is. We got everything here. U.S. Olympic stuff, everything. Rodeo. Good spot.
You're out there with Dion.
That's what I was going to say.
I'm gonna go see. I'm gonna go see the Buffalo basketball team Saturday night, and Mike will be interested to know that Tad Boyle's coming down to Colorado Springs tomorrow, and we're gonna have dinner.
Oh, nice.
And I'll be at Air Force Academy practice today.
All right, here we go, guys. 5 seconds.
Here we go.
Catering.com. That's garnishcatering.com. Garnish Catering is a proud partner of Wow Food Group. This segment is brought to you by The Ugly Grouper. Now back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Wow Food Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio here on this Tuesday, October 24th. Thank you so much for being along with us. We appreciate you greatly. Mike DeCourcy from the Sporting News and Big Ten Network still with us here. And we are so fortunate to be joined by the great Fran Fraschilla, currently an ESPN analyst, former college basketball coach as well. Was a smart man to get out of coaching and just sit there on the sideline and talk about it and get paid and not have to do the recruiting and all of that business. What is the best thing about being in TV as opposed to coaching? The rigor, the not that being in TV is easy because there's still
easy. Jim, it's easy. It's easy.
Compared to coaching.
do not make that complicated. I have an easy job because all I do is I talk basketball my whole life since I was 13, and now I get paid for it. And trust me, it's much easier than coaching.
What is the best part? Is it not having to travel as much, but you still have to do some traveling? But actually, what do you just travel? Do you have to travel to Bristol?
Not much anymore. We've kind of delineated the roles between studio and on-site games. And I'd much rather do a game anyway. But to answer your question, and Mike knows this well, I think the greatest thing that happened to me at 43, and humble brag, I went to 8 pro seasons in 9 years as a head coach, as Mike knows. I got tired. I got burnt out, and I got burnt out in the sense that once I realized that I had 2 little boys at home who are both coaching now, I just had a blast. ESPN gave me an opportunity to make a living, not make as much money as some of my friends in coaching, but my longevity probably compared to most of them sustained itself. And I got to be a dad. And as you know, Mike knows this well because we've talked about it many times. I've been lucky enough to have 2 great careers, 23 years as a coach, 21st year at ESPN, and everything centers around the orange leather ball, which I always am grateful for.
You've been at ESPN for 21 years.
This will be year 21. They don't even know it, to be honest with you, but that's a whole
wow. I would have not guessed that.
I know. I left coaching at 43 on the way to 44. I can't believe I turned 65. I know I don't look it, but I've been.
You don't. That's why I'm like, I can't believe you've been at ESPN for 21 years. I'm like, oh.
I think part of the reason, knock on wood, I've stayed healthy this long, honestly, is just there's been no stress or limited stress in my life. And, we all love what we did. I mean, we all got into coaching. I got into coaching, in 1980 at the college level. And nobody knew that you could make this much money if you were a Big 10 or a Big 12 or ACC coach. And I just feel fortunate that, now it's 42, 43 years of just doing something I've always had a passion for. So I think I'm one of the lucky ones that gets to do what they love doing.
Well, we're very fortunate to have you, and we're fortunate to have you on ESPN. I very much enjoy your analysis. There are some people who just keep it real, and you're one of those, and I greatly appreciate that. Mike is also one of those. He's the great equalizer. I love having him with us each week because I have a tendency to kind of drift off over here, and Mike's like a fisherman. He's got to pull me back in, baby.
Yeah.
But very fortunate to have both of you.
I'll say this, Jim. What I love about Mike, he's been a dear friend for many years, is he is never at a loss to disagree with me if he feels strongly about something. Like he's not placating me because I say something about, the transfer portal or NIL or, what league is better or who's the MVP, who's the National Player of the Year. What I love about Mike is he makes you think about what you think about the game of basketball. And I never told him that, but I always appreciate the fact that if he is not hesitant to disagree with me just because I happen to be Fran Fraschilla, which outside of my house really is not that big a deal anyway.
That's crazy. Mike, basketball coming up, of course. Well, the one thing I will say that I wanted to do you think that Marvin Harrison Jr. is not the leader, but is the best Heisman candidate? I know you think you've stated that you think he's the best player in college football.
Yeah, I just I see him every week do things that other people don't do. I mean, there are times when I think if he stays healthy, he's going to be a better pro football player than his dad was, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
His dad was about as good as it got as a wide receiver, but Marvin Jr. is bigger, has a lot of athletic things, dynamic things that his father was. Look, his father was tremendous, unbelievable, one of the greatest of all time. But I really think that his son has physical gifts that his father maybe even he didn't quite get to that level. I think he still can become a little bit better at catching routine balls. He had a couple of drops in the Penn State game on Saturday. His father didn't have many of those in his career. But he just does things that other players don't do. And that's why I think, it's very rare for a receiver to get a fair shot at this. But I think that if they continue to play, as they have, I think he should get a real good look.
Fran's line of he's 2 years from being 2 years away is still a great line. It reminds me of me. I'm this close to being mediocre.
We're all 2 years away from being 2 years away. Really, I don't want to get philosophical about it, but that came out of nowhere. Obviously, Bruno Caboclo, NBA draft. I can't remember, probably 7 or 8 years ago, and I knew who the kid was. Most anybody in basketball didn't. I had some connections down in Brazil, and I heard he was going to go in the mid-second round. I watched him play. I talked to my Brazilian friends. And when the Raptors took him in the first round, I was dumbfounded. And I gave the usual, he's the Brazilian Kevin Durant. He would be like a high school top 50 player. And, I was running out of things to say, and I wasn't able to throw it back to Reese Davis. And I said, I learned this from Danny Nee, my boss at Ohio University years ago. I'd go up and see some big kid in Toledo, come back, and he'd go, "What do you think?" And I go, he's 2 years away from being 2 years away, which means we didn't want to recruit him. And then he wasn't good enough, because we only had 4 years with the guy. And I blurted it out, and much to the chagrin of the front office of the Raptors, who some have never forgiven me, but I turned out to be accurate, And
No, you weren't, because he wasn't even 2 years away from being 2 years away.
I know, and I actually rooted for the guy. He was in the World Cup with Brazil and played well, and he's in Italy this year. But I just blurted it out, and I felt so bad when it came out of my mouth, but. I got a lot of notoriety for that. So,
well, my favorite you just said was, and I love to see this in a story, Brazilian sources. My sources in Brazil.
Yes,
that's not a line you hear very often.
Well embedded moles, as our friend John Rothstein would say. I had some well embedded moles down there.
College basketball is right around the corner. I know Indiana has an exhibition game on Sunday. The Big 12, the Big 10, lots of expectations. I know with the Big 10, you've got the Big 2 this year right now with Purdue and Michigan State. Not a lot of questions after that, whether it's Illinois, Maryland, Ohio State, Indiana. Don't know who's going to do what in that little mix. But can the Big Ten break through? But Purdue has just not had success in the tournament ever, and especially here of late. And I think that they can say that there's not, but there has got to be a ton of pressure on Purdue in some form or fashion to have what they have to produce, to get to the Final Four, to show that they're a national championship caliber team.
Yeah, and I root for Matt Painter. He is he's not only a tremendous coach and good human being, he's really kind of become the voice of college coaches. He's never afraid to step up and say what he thinks about various important issues. I love the fact in the offseason that he's owned the lack of success, which I think will help them. I think Tony Bennett, went through something similar. I'm rooting for Matt. I'm rooting for Purdue to do really well, and I expect them to. I'm still anxious about the backcourt. Those kids came on and early last season surprised us, and then floundered towards the end. Neither one is a great athlete per se, and it's not all about athleticism, but I think that's the key to their season. I think they've got great depth up front. They've got a lot of different pieces, with First and Tillis, I believe. There's some other guys that they've redshirted. But that's going to be a key. And actually, I'm anxious to see if Zach Edey can have the same kind of year or even better, because he was so good last year, so dominant. I'm anxious to see how Matt plays them. And then Michigan State this is a typical old school 1995, 2004, 2006 Michigan State team. I'm throwing dates out there, but it's old school Michigan State with upperclassmen, with toughness, with grit. And again, another good friend. I'm rooting for Coach Izzo to do well. I think the rest of the league is up for grabs. To answer your question, Jim, I think it's cyclical. I look at the rest of the Big Ten this year, and there's certainly some very good players. I think there's some questions really right down the line, with Illinois and Maryland. Looks like they've got a good lineup based on the transfer portal. I watched Ohio State the other day. Wasn't overly impressed. I'm rooting for Chris Holtman. I saw Wisconsin at the end of the year. They're sneaky good. Wall's got to come back and have a better end of year than he did at the end of last year. He lost his confidence, and I told him as such in the NIT. So I think it's going to be an interesting year in the Big Ten. Cyclically down a little, in my opinion, but certainly like on the rise as we get into this expansion situation the next few years.
Well, remember, Fran, Tyler got hurt midway.
Yes, he did.
Mm-hmm. And that's what really, he was never the same player after. I think he went through multiple games missed. And then when he came back, I don't know that he was 100%. And I think that was the genesis of what you saw in terms of his confidence.
I think it was that, Mike, by the end of the year in March, he seemed to be healthy, but he had lost his confidence. And then, the young man from Fort Wayne, Connor Sejan, I think he just hit a wall at the end of the year, just physically.
Right.
So, but they've got a few pieces. Kroll's really, become a good player. I'm anxious to see them because by all rights, they should make a step up in the conference.
I agree.
Really should.
I really do.
Indiana hoping to make a run for the border.
Yeah.
Oh, just try to get that in there. Just being smart, just being silly. But Indiana, a team that has a ton of new faces in a ton of critical spots. We know what they lost in Trace Jackson Davis and Jalen Hood-Schifino. A lot of points, a lot of a veteran player, a very elite, a talented player. Luckily, they have a veteran player coming back in one of those spots, in Xavier Johnson at the point. but the rest is up for question. I'll start with Mackenzie Mbako and just leave it at that.
Yeah.
Considered one of the best players, and I've heard a ton of great things about him since he's been here, aside from going through drive-thrus. But Kalel Ware, there's a big question.
Yes.
He needs some weight on him, but can he just use his athletic skills? I mean, there's no way he's going to go up against a guy like Zach Edey. Zach Edey will hip him into the 14th row of a game. So how teams attack Zach Edey? You mentioned that. I don't think you're going to stop him. I think you have to stop the other players, which was kind of what the formula was for last year. But Indiana's a team that they really need to maintain that momentum that they had of making the tournament, they need to get to the second round. But I don't know that replacing everybody is the recipe for doing that.
Well, I got to tell you, I was talking to somebody yesterday, and I'm trying to think of who it was in the NBA, and the Warriors, for the 57th pick, they absolutely love Trace Jackson Davis. I saw him get 37.
Doing very well.
Yeah, he got 37 at Illinois last year. I was there on the radio, and I was just mesmerized by just how efficient he was. And I think of the great players in college basketball last year, even though he was a Naismith finalist, and I think he's going to be sorely missed because he was such a dominant player, not only for Indiana but in the league. And you're getting Xavier Johnson back is good. It's he's a solid player. I mean, he's obviously had a mercurial run up and down at times, but hopefully more up than down. And Mbako, I don't know, man. I've given him the benefit of the doubt. That was bizarre just reading the reports the other night. We've all been at Taco Bell's at 3 a.m. and done stupid stuff, but that was a little much when you have to break a window to get the guy out. So I guess I'll reserve judgment there. I think they're going to be middle of the pack. I mean, obviously the recruiting's going well for the future, and that's certainly a good sign for Woody. But is it going to be Renault, Anthony Leal? Callaway's back. I'm anxious to see them because they're going to miss Trace. Trace was phenomenal.
Mike knows that more than most. He has seen very intently covering the Big Ten and knows these teams inside and out, and how difficult it is when you replace that much, because there is momentum is such an important part of that. And Purdue has that. Michigan State has that. They've got the core of those guys back. Can Michigan State knock off Purdue as the Big Ten champion? Mike?
Go ahead, Mike.
I was going to say, one of the interesting things about those two teams is that each of them could win the Big Ten by staying intact or compete at that level, be 1-2.
Yeah.
By staying basically the same team they were a year ago. But obviously, each of them also has greater ambition than that. And in order to reach that ambition, they're not going to do it just by staying what they were. Michigan State is not winning the national championship with the 5 guys that played last year. Purdue is not making the Final Four with the 5 guys that played last year. That they can win the Big Ten with that, but they can't get to where they want to go. They each have to incorporate their freshmen. In the case of Michigan State, Xavier Booker has to be a factor. In the case of Purdue, I believe in order to take the next step, that Roosevelt Colvin, who played really well in the exhibitions for them on the tour, he's got to be a factor, because they offer components that the former group or the current/former group didn't have. The next level dynamism. In Colvin's case, at least he's been shooting the basketball at a level that didn't happen often enough at Purdue last year. So Fran, you can talk about that and what it takes to do that, to take a team that's been really good and say, okay, we need to add something here that's going to make it from good to great.
Yeah, and I think you're right, Mike. I think in both cases, in a perfect world, both teams have Final Four ambitions. There's no question about it. Forget the early loss last year, to FDU by Purdue. I mean, obviously nobody in the state of Indiana can forget it, especially if you're a Purdue fan. But that team last year had Sweet 16 level ability when you look at the whole. And I love Roosevelt Colvin because I love the fact that Matt Painter has always played to his strengths. That kid can get his own shot. He's really a good player. I saw him at the under-19 trials, Mike, and I was really impressed with him. Matt was out here, and I'm going to be anxious to see how Matt incorporates him because of your point. He's very much a dynamic player. You mentioned Booker. I think Jeremy Fears is going to be an outstanding and Big Ten player. As good as Hoggard and Tyson Walker are at times, Jeremy's just another next level player. He just is, albeit without experience. For either of those teams to make a deep run in the tournament, I think to your point, there's got to be more than what they've got coming back. Because what they've got coming back is good enough to get to a Sweet 16 and in a perfect world, an Elite Eight. But to have a chance to win it all when you have the National Player of the Year or the depth and experience of Michigan State, I think those freshmen definitely can play a big role. And, I'm really excited about those two teams because I think I just like both coaches as you do. And their programs are run the right way. They got great fan bases, and it would be fun to see both of them, having great success throughout the course of the season.
I think we need to take a quick break. If Mike can stick around for another segment, and I'd love to have Fran. We'll finish this out in the next hour. Back with more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with the great Fran Fraschilla with us and Mike DeCourcy right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Wow Food Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
In the market for a hate time. There's not enough of it. You guys are too great. It's like trying to squeeze there's too much greatness to squeeze into that balloon.
I don't know.
Next time you're in Bloomington, Fran, dinner's on me, brother.
Oh man, I love Bloomington. I'll have to wait till my Fox contract. Because I'm not going to see Bloomington anytime in my ESPN career, which is so stupid.
No, that's true. That's sad. Get on Fox. Get on Fox.
Yeah, no, everything works out.
CBS or CBS.
Yeah, no, I'm blessed. Year 21, they keep hiring me. So, Mike,
they have some good ones. They have someone I'd like to have switch over.
No, it's good. I love my Big Ten friends. I got the. Fran
they're great.
And Matt and Izzo and Chris Holtman and Billy. Pretty much everybody in that league's my friend.
Matt not only is Matt a great guy, Matt could have been an Indiana Hoosier.
I know.
I remember when I think Todd Leary got the scholarship that Matt Painter turned down, is how that worked out. And that scholarship was available because Jay Edwards got booted, I believe.
I remember. I was at Ohio State. I was at Ohio State when Jay and Lyndon. In fact, the day we played them in 88, 89, I think we got great news at the shoot-around that Coach Knight was benching Jay Edwards, and they still beat us. They still beat us. But no, I have a lot of ties to Coach Knight, and I became pretty friendly towards the end, and I'm staying in touch with Pat because, as you guys know, Coach is struggling right now. And we've all been on both sides of Bob Knight. Let's put it that way.
Pat was, that one side is definitely not good. Pat was in town recently.
Yeah, I know. I've been texting him because he's, I think he's living in Indy, just taking care of Dad while he's scouting. But I was going to tell you, and I think I hope Mike's listening, but Jeff Goodman's daughter, who's down at
Indiana, she's at IU. Right.
She actually did a great sit down with Pat last week.
Yeah,
it was.
I think most people probably saw it.
There was some really good behind the scenes Bob and Pat Knight stuff that I had never heard a couple of those stories. And
there's a few I could tell you, but it would be off air. I was in school the same time. I
get it.
I went to same school, high school as Pat Graham.
Got it.
So
where was that? Was that in Indy?
Floyd Central's in southern Indiana, down close to Louisville.
Yeah. Down by Washington and down by the Zellers.
Actually, further, just straight south of Indy, all the way down to the river.
Wow. 10 seconds, guys. All right, here we go.
583-0919 or go to mystonecrestliving.com. That's mystonecrestliving.com for more details. This segment is brought to you by Metalworks Brewing Company. Now back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Wow Food Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Welcome back on this Tuesday. Indiana Sports Beat Radio coming to you from high atop the 18th fairway at the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios. Very fortunate to have the great Mike DeCourcy with us, as always, from the Sporting News and Big Ten Network, but also a added bonus, Fran Fraschilla from ESPN, graciously joining us today, and we are so happy about that. And in the break, we were talking about Pat and Bob Knight. I said I had some great stories I could tell you, but they'd have to be off air. He was a character, it still is, but I was very fortunate at last year when Indiana played Arizona in Las Vegas, which is where Pat has his main residence now while he's scouting for the Pacers.
Yep.
But Dean Garrett also lives in Las Vegas, works at New York, and I'm very good friends with Dean. I was having Dean come over to do the post-game show, and then got Pat to do the post-game show, which I think was the first IU media he had done since they left. So I'm happy about that. And then when Bob Knight returned to IU at the baseball game, not the basketball game, but before that he came to a baseball game. I was fortunate enough to get a quick interview with Bob there, and it was the first and only interview of him on campus. So we've got that going for us. I'll put that on my tombstone.
Yeah, Jim, let me tell you a quick Bob Knight story, if you don't mind.
I love it.
I grew up revering Coach Knight. All of us young coaches in the 70s and 80s, we studied the motion offense, man-to-man defense. And of course, I spent 8 years in Ohio at Ohio University and Ohio State. And, Bob was revered as much in Ohio, obviously, because of his ties to the Buckeyes. But he actually replaced me as Mike knows, on the Big 12 for 3 years. I had to go over to the schlubby Big East and cover, Syracuse and Villanova and teams like that. But
that was an upgrade back then, wasn't it?
Well, I we'll leave that as it may be. But the very end of his career at ESPN, they asked me, hey, Bob Knight's contract's coming up. It's going to, we're not renewing him or something along those lines. Would you mind working the NIT with him? And I said, absolutely not. I'd love it. And they didn't know. They didn't know. And I say this respectfully to anybody, Jay Billis or anybody. I know more about Bob Knight than anybody at ESPN by a mile. And Jay played for Coach K, so obviously he's got some stories. But we're doing the NIT in New York, and obviously his reviews as an announcer were not phenomenal because he just said, the big white kid, or that kid's really quick, and what number 3 is a good rebounder, So we're doing the first NIT game in the Garden, and ball goes up in the first couple possessions, and there's a shot taken, and it wasn't a good shot. And I said, Coach, that wasn't a shot you would have let Buckner take. And that lit the fuse, And then a few minutes later, I said, Coach, what was it like when you brought Army down to the NIT? And he said, Fran, we'd leave at 2:30, get on the train down here and stop at Nedick's for pregame meal. That was an old hot dog place under the Garden. And I engaged him the whole night. And he's drawing plays on a napkin, not realizing it's not a telestrator. He goes, Fran, I think they got to move the guy here. Now, no one on TV can see this, But at the end of that night, the semifinals of the NIT, he gets up and slaps me on the back, which he's done 10,000 times to people, and said, that was really enjoyable. And the cherry on the icing on the cake was Pat texted me, and we become friends through the years. And he said, thanks for taking care of my dad. And that meant a lot to me because, obviously Coach Knight can be polarizing, but those of us who know and been on both sides of him know there's a softness there too that a lot of people don't know is there. So that was fun.
I can imagine, because sometimes it takes the right person to deal with. It's like Jason Benetti. But if there was no Jason Benetti, there would be no Bill Walton.
Very true.
Somebody's got to drive that train because otherwise it would go out of control.
I call it a lion tamer. You're a lion tamer.
That's very much it.
Are you telling me, before you move on, are you telling me that this is him under control? Is that what you're trying to tell me?
Hey, another time I had said something it was like one of those, I said something, someone else heard it. They told somebody else, they told Coach Knight. And this was when he was at Texas Tech. And he said, I don't want him coming to the shoot around tomorrow. Well, they were playing Kansas, so it really wouldn't have mattered because it was in Allen Fieldhouse. I think they got beat by 30. But, I'm saying, do I go to the shoot around or not? And I called my boss at ESPN. He said, do what you want. And I said, no, I know Coach Knight. I'm going to the shoot around. And so the first 30 minutes of the shoot around, he's looking over at me from the other end of the court. Like, what is this guy doing here? And finally, during the water break, he comes barging down to me. He goes, hey, you think we ought to recruit junior college players? And I go, yeah, Coach, you're in West Texas. There's about 20 of them there. He goes, yeah, me too. And that was his way of saying, you had the guts to come in here. So we're all good now, Yeah,
it seems sometimes it took that to get his respect, I guess you'd say, because he's take it as you or leave it kind of a person. I did not have the fortune to know him like you did, but I did get to, when I was very young and in my early part of my career, I did get to ask one of those questions in the post-game press conference that ended the press conference. So he's like, that's stupid. I'm out. So I got one of those once. So enjoying that.
Knowing Coach Knight, that was probably a really good question.
It wouldn't have mattered. But plus, but you had to ask questions that you already knew the answer to, but nobody cared to hear me say it. They want to hear Bob Knight say it.
One more quick Coach Knight story, if you don't mind. And I hope your listeners don't mind. I know it's,
they love it.
I know. I was at Ohio. I think I've told Mike this story, but Mike, we played Indiana when I was at Ohio U in like 85. And I don't know, Steve was on the team. I think Dockich told me later it was one of his best games. I think he had like 9 points. And but we go there on a Saturday afternoon. And
we've lost Mike.
No, I mean that's what he told me. I didn't say that. He told me that. But Danny Nee was a Digger Phelps guy, and Coach Knight and Digger were very close, going back to the days in New York at Fordham and Army. And I know he respected Digger because he didn't cheat. And we go over, and we had a really good team at Ohio U. I don't know if you're old enough to remember, Jim, but Ron Harper was at Miami.
Oh, yeah.
And Ron Hunter, actually, Eddie Schilling from Lebanon. Miami and Ohio U, we were the two best teams in the league at that time, and changing off winning the MAC every year. So we go over on a Saturday afternoon with a really good young team. We lose like 91-77, and Coach Knight comes down to us, shakes our hand, and he says to Danny Nee, call me tomorrow. I want to tell you about your team. And so it's a Saturday. The late Billy Hahn from Mishawaka, my dear friend, he and I go to church on Sunday morning. We meet Danny at noon. We're getting ready, to talk to Danny. And he had talked to Coach Knight for 2 hours. And Coach Knight broke down our team. He basically said, hey, this kid's really good. You need to get him more shots. We could guard this play really well. You need to move this guy over to the left block. And he basically gave us a scouting report. And Danny took everything to heart. And no one would ever know that. Like, what opposing coach would call you to tell you how to improve your team? And that's a typical behind the scenes Bob Knight story that, never gets told when you think of all the negative things, about him. So coach is coach in that regard.
Well, he loved I think he loved the game of basketball, and he loved the challenge of it. He was a history major. That's kind of, Dick E.V. gave him the general title, but history was a big thing for him, and studying that. And I would have to imagine that somehow along the way, some of those strategies filtered into what he did. I mean, the motion offense that I learned from talking to so many IU players, that was an offense based simply on decision-making, nonstop decision-making by the offensive player. And it's like, wow, It was just constantly changing, and it's like how the hell you defend that? But I'm wondering why do not people run more of it now? And they're like,
well, because very few people can teach it like he did, quite honestly. And I majored in American history with a minor in military history because of two people, Bob Knight and Woody Hayes. And because I grew up in the 70s and I knew I wasn't going to be a PE major. I left the first bio lab, first day of school, that we were cutting up frogs on my first day of college. I said, I'm out of here. I'm not doing this. And I majored in American history, quite honestly, because of Coach Knight. And I became a Civil War buff because of him. So he had a great influence on me, although he probably doesn't know it, and most people don't. Because I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and here's a guy from Orville, Ohio. But Mike, I don't mean to dominate this, but
are you kidding me? You're dominating like Zach Edey, though. You know, with all the good stuff.
Oh man,
how are you going to stop him exactly? All right? So how do you stop a Zach Edey? I don't think you do. I think you try to slow him down, like I said earlier, and you have to attack the other pieces.
Yeah, although
from a strategy standpoint, from a war standpoint, speaking of which we were talking about, what do you do in that situation?
I'll tell you, there's times when you do play a guy like that the best course of action is to go right at him, and psychologically, hey, like he's saying, wow, I can't believe they're trying to score on me, because I think you got to get him in foul trouble. And the only way you get him in foul trouble is to go hard at the basket. Now you're going to get your shot blocked 5 times or more, but I think oftentimes with a big guy, you take it right through him and hope that you can get him in, foul trouble. But he's hard to guard and he's hard to stop, and I can't wait to see the next iteration of Zach this season.
He's a big guy.
Yeah, had a great summer with Canada too.
Yeah, I think that the other thing though is that what was done by FDU and some others is that you have to force the other guys to beat you. Yeah. And that's that. And they may have grown to the point where that may not be an effective strategy this year. I think that's what the Boilers have to establish over the course of the year. I'm not going to say early, because it isn't about November. It's about what you build early and then continue to construct. I wasn't surprised that team wasn't capable of making the Final Four last year, even though they did a great job to be able to come into Chicago last year and win the Big Ten tournament. It was clear that the freshman guards had lost some of their fastball by the nature of playing 10 to 15 more games and 20 to 30 pound heavier players, stronger players than they'd ever played before. But I will say that one of the things I've talked about on multiple occasions in regards to, and I'm interested to hear what you think of this, Fran, is that I think that you have to go into games like that with a sort of competitive arrogance. Like if you're talking about that disparity in the seed lines, you have to believe that you're better. You can't disrespect the opposition, but you have to believe you're better, and you have to play like that. Like, you guys should not be in this game, and we're not going to let you play. And I thought Carolina did a great job of that, even though it wasn't a great Carolina team in 2022. I thought they did a great job of saying to St. Peter's, this is not going to be a game. You guys, congratulations on making the Elite Eight, first 15 seed ever. Now go home. And that's something that Purdue didn't do in either year. And I thought that was a problem for them.
Well, it's interesting. I completely agree with you. Like, we all know that on paper, they are a top 3, top 4 team. There's no doubt. But the curiosity for me is the mental approach. That's another Coach Knight line there. The mental approach. Like, how do you first of all, I want to see how good let's go back physically. I want to see how much improvement the 2 freshman guards have made now that they're sophomores. I want to see if Roosevelt Colvin is the X factor, because he's different. He's kind of like throwback to the, Troy Lewis, Todd Mitchell. There's always been Glenn Robinson, obviously, Konzo. I want to see how he makes a difference. Obviously, we want to see how Zach has improved his game. But most importantly, I think, is what you talk about. Matt has owned the lack of success in the tournament. I'm anxious to see how he figures it out, because he's a very bright guy. He's an excellent coach. So I think there's still that question mark about them, about how far they can go in the tournament. until we see it. And that competitive arrogance, I think that has to be seen early in the season. They've got to blow some teams out by 40 on their non-conference schedule.
Let me bounce one more concept off of you, because you saw this firsthand in last year's Big 12, the literal deepest conference in the history of college basketball. You coached in what had been the previous deepest conference in 1991 Big East, when they got 7 out of 9 teams, and you coached on the 8th that should have been in or could have been in Providence. And then last year you coached the team. You broadcasted the league that had 10 good teams. They only got 7, and that's what was probably right. Yeah. But they had 10 teams that on, I don't know, February 20th still had a chance to make it. Is that a detriment for those teams succeeding in March? Because we're seeing that those leagues where you don't get any nights off, those teams are having trouble getting through the first, second, third round.
I think it's a two-edged sword. If you look at the Big 12 last year, they started out the tournament. Now, obviously, since 2019, the Big 12 is at 5 out of 10 schools. Now there's 14, but 5 of the 10 have gone to an Elite 8. 2 national titles, Texas Tech in the championship game, a play away from being the 3rd national champion. And then last year, you added Texas and Kansas State to the Elite 8. And early in the tournament, when some teams got bounced earlier, Kansas loses to Arkansas without Bill Self. But then they finished up, I think, with a bang when you look at, K-State being a player or 2 away from the Final Four. Texas, really, if they don't lose Dessou, chance they get to the Final Four. So I think it's a two-edged sword, Mike. A league like the Big 10 or the Big East or the Big 12 certainly takes a lot out of you. There's no question. But I think it's up to the coach to manage the end of the season from like February 15th on, because by that time you've been through a gauntlet physically and mentally. And the great coaches do their very best to finish the regular season into the conference tournament with the idea that we got to keep these guys fresh mentally and physically. And I've seen it go both ways. I've seen Big 10 and Big East teams win on Sunday in the tournament and lose on Thursday, 4 days later, 72 hours. So there's a lot of variables there, but I think it cuts both ways, and I think it's up to the individual coach to do the best they can to keep their team fresh because of the gauntlet.
4 is the 1 is the mental is the physical. Another one of those good Bob Knight isms. Yeah. Indiana has a great. Well, I don't know how you look at it. Great on whose side, but they play early on up in the Empire Classic. You've got a game against UConn, the reigning national champion, and let's say however that game goes, they're going to play either Louisville or Texas after that. They play Harvard. Then there are 2 Big 10 games swung in there, which you've got to swing into conference play, which I know everybody thinks it's just another game. Well, that's not really. And then you step back out of that, and you have to go play Auburn in Atlanta, and then the number 1 team, Kansas, but you'll have at home. So Indiana with a very, very fan-friendly schedule to open this season, and Kentucky coming to a court near you in the near future finally.
Well, I do like what Woody's doing. The recruiting, as I mentioned earlier, we'll have to see with McKenzie how this shakes out, but they've really gotten after it recruiting this kid McNeely from Dallas. I know that family, being a Dallas guy, big basketball family, kind of fits the Indiana Hoosier mold. He'll be a hero. A cult. I don't know, say a cult figure like Damon Bailey or Alford. That's stretching it certainly, but I like the direction Woody's going. He's embraced. I always say this, Jim. There's more coaching in an NBA game than there would be in 4 college games. Honestly, there's more possessions. You're guarding the best players in the world. You're trying to score against the best defenses. So Woody certainly has had no issue with the coaching. The question mark was the recruiting. And he's got a good staff. I know his staff well. They've really done a great job, I think, of highlighting the history and tradition of IU basketball, even to kids outside of the state. So now, having said that, I think this is going to be a middling year for them just because, they've lost some key pieces. But I would say, and I don't know how Mike feels, he knows the league better than me, other than the two at the top, and with the possible exception of Maryland having a lot of veterans and guys that have played at other places, I think 3 to 10, Mike, is pretty much up for grabs.
Absolutely. I agree with that 100%. I think that there are very good teams in there, but Indiana has the ability to be one of those. I think having a veteran point guard, if Xavier Johnson has a great year, and he has to, I mean, not being there, you have to have a great year.
Yes.
But having that possibility to have a veteran point guard to bring together all of the various other players that could impact the team, I think that they have a chance. It's one of those teams I say when I try to do preseason, I say, if everything goes right, or most everything goes right, they can finish really prominently in the league. And if everything goes wrong, they can miss the tournament. And because there are some teams that don't have great variables other than health. There's not a lot of variables at Michigan State. You know, other than the new guys, you know what every guy can do. They lose one player who was impactful for them last year in Hauser, and then everybody else has done it before. So you don't have that variable. The ceiling is pretty high, but the floor is really high. And with an Indiana, you're talking about, the floor could be a little low if things go wrong, but the ceiling is still pretty far up there because you're talking about Malik Renew, who was a 5-star player, and Khalil Ware, although, a different kind of player, another guy who has a 5-star ceiling. And so there are real, and Mbako, if you get past this circumstance, a 5-star ceiling. So there is some reason to believe that if things go right, that they can have a significant year.
And Jim, you mentioned Khalil Ware 16 months ago at the Hoop Summit. I thought he was a one and done. He to me was better than Derek Lively that week that I was out there. I broadcast the game, and for the life of me, I don't know what happened at Oregon other than they had the big fella Mike Nafali Dante trying to play two bigs, and I'm anxious to see Khalil because, to Mike's point, he's a 5-star guy. Really should have been a one and done in my mind. And now he gets a chance to renew his career in Bloomington and be much more of a focal point. I think, to Mike's point, like, he's one of those guys that we all thought was going to be as good and wasn't. And now he's got a chance to redeem himself, if you will, as a sophomore.
Last thing before I let you guys go, you talk about there are programs like Indiana who have the history. The portal and NIL is now equalized a lot of that, but it's also given those programs, they can attack that as well. How important and how much has the portal and NIL changed the game? You were a coach when it wasn't there, and now from the broadcasting side, you can see it. You see more people actually than anybody than probably when you were coaching, because you're seeing so many different teams.
Yeah.
Both of you, actually.
I would say, Mike, that I think the portal's been in existence since 2018, although immediate eligibility is in the last year. And I said 3 or 4 years ago to coaches, your number one job description now is roster management coordinator. And now that's more true than ever. And you're basically year to year with your program. It's really impossible, or nearly impossible, to build a program, quote, anymore. You're building a team from year to year. And certainly now I've embraced a new normal. It is what it is. And that goes along with NIL. And so from my standpoint, as a former coach, I tell my buddies who are coaching, if you don't embrace this is going to run you over like a truck, because it's the way things are now. And certainly the NIL, I think, has a lot of positives, some negatives, but there's a lot of good. The teams are older and they're better, I think, because you're not relying on freshmen. And Mike, I don't know how you feel about it, but I would embrace it if I were, a coach.
I don't think you have any choice but to embrace it. If you don't, then you're going to fail. If you fight it, or if you don't work at it, you're going to fail. I think we've seen coaches who tried to push it into the background and then ultimately realized that it was a mistake, that they were losing players they would ordinarily get if they had embraced the concept at an earlier date, and they're catching up, but they're having to play catch up, and they as I said, lost players for a period of time that they would have gotten. If you don't, I think that you're looking at failure. I think you're right that it's nearly impossible to build, but I think that a couple of coaches we've talked about here, at Michigan State and Purdue, have been able to continue to do that. I think Villanova had Jay decided to stay in the building, would have been able to continue that. You have to be really adept at running your program to be able to do that.
But I would say on the flip side of that, Scott Drew and Mark Few were ahead of the curve with transfers too.
Right.
You know, that's 4 guys that I have ultimate respect for.
Yes.
And they've done, and G5, because obviously my son Matt worked at Villanova for Jay, so I've seen it close up, but that's 5 guys doing it different ways. I think the whole point is you have to continue to be adaptable.
Absolutely.
Former native of Valpo, Scott Drew, and then of course a shout out to our former Indiana basketball manager Dusty May, who got his program to the Final Four last year in a great run. Fran, I cannot begin to thank you enough for taking the time to come on. I know it's a little earlier for you out there, but we're so grateful for you to take the time to be with us. Of course, I'm always grateful to have Mike DeCourcy with us as well, but it's been a treat for not just for me, but obviously the fans have absolutely loved having you guys on.
Hey, before we go, let's shout out Fran, now director of the 3x3 program for USA Basketball. USA Basketball swept the Pan Am Games, so on track. I know it's a curious process you have to go through to qualify for the 2024 Olympics in Paris, but
I didn't know that.
We're a week away from qualifying, and Jim, we have a guy that's a pretty good player for us. You probably heard of him, Jimmer Fredette.
Oh, Jimmer Fredette. Oh, yeah. So that must be the reason why the move to Colorado Springs.
Well, I've been coincidentally, actually, but it makes things easier. But we're about a week. November 1st. We're. I don't want to say we're in. I think we're in, but November 1st, we'll officially probably have an automatic bid to Paris. So we're looking forward to that.
Well, we will absolutely be following that and stay up, and hopefully we'll have you back on again to talk about that.
Look forward to it. Always enjoy talking to Mike, and pleasure being with you, Jim.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, Fran Fraschilla. Mike DeCourcy, thank you as much as well. As always, make sure you give both of them a follow. Of course, Fran now, in addition to his duties on ESPN, the director for 3-on-3 basketball for USA Basketball. Mike DeCourcy, of course, make sure you're following his content at the Sporting News and on the Big Ten Network. Guys, thank you so much, and I hope you have a great rest of your week.
Thanks, Jim.
Guys. See ya.
Thanks, Fran.
We're back with more Indiana Sports Beat Radio right after this. Chronic
We'll
Hoosier
be right
joins
back
us.
to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Wow Food Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Yeah,
once you say right after this, that's when I just automatically.
I know. I knew as soon as I did it, I knew.
It's fine.
Chronic, how are you, brother?
Oh man, I'm a little hurt. I didn't get my proper intro there, Jim. Come on now. I'm fucking with you. I'm messing with you.
I'm
good.
I screw. Trust me, I screw everything up. Believe me. Believe you me.
No, that's a cool conversation. I was glad to get a chance to jump in and listen to it.
Fran was just absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. Look, I did not know he was the director of 3-on-3 basketball for USA.
I did not know that either. I literally just saw the men's and women's advanced in the was it the Copa America? One of the qualifiers.
That'll give me an excuse to have him back on again. All right, John Boy, we'll just take this and then I'll break it
to like 10:20.
10. Yes.
Between
exactly
10:20, 10:23, and then we'll have a short segment to wrap things up.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Thanks for waiting for us, Chronic. We appreciate it.
No worries. I'm getting some stuff caught up at the office, so it worked out well.
Yeah, that was a bonus. Those guys were great.
Yeah, heck of a couple of segments with them.
What's new with you, brother?
Not a thing, man. One of those weekends felt like we time warped 10 years backwards. Losing big recruits and checking the police blotter first thing in the morning to see what kind of shenanigans happen.
I'm trying not to, I talked about it yesterday and I'm like, there's not much more to talk about with it. It is what it is. But I'm like, I just keep shaking my head. I'm like, really? Come on, man. I would have understood it if he had been drunk.
Well, I'll tell you what.
But there was no alcohol involved.
I know. And there's a door that I don't want to step into.
Right. And I've heard the possibility of that.
I think it makes everything a whole lot more understandable when you consider being given the opportunity to exit a situation freely without arrest
for 15 minutes
and repeatedly choosing to stay into that situation, as I see it, is per se someone in crisis, because a normal person in their right mind does not make that choice. And I will
leave and back in.
I've lost my stuff in that drive-through line myself multiple occasions.
Yeah.
I have driven over the curb after sitting there for 25 minutes and getting blocked in because they're open. The whole staff is out back smoking and getting high.
I know we're going fired up. We're coming back from break. Here we go, guys.
Table, a part of the Wild Food Group, is your butcher, baker, and fish house, no matter where you live.
This segment is brought to you by Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington. Now back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Wow Food Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Hey, welcome back. It is Tuesday, October 24th here at Indiana Sports Beat Radio, coming to you from high atop the 18th fairway, Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios. Now, one of our favorites, Chronic Hoosier, joining us. Thanks for staying a little longer, waiting because of Fran Fraschilla and Mike DeCourcy. We went a little long there, but thank you very much for being patient, sir.
I'll tell you what, man, you want to have talks like that, I'll take a backseat 7 days a week and twice on Sunday. That was a great listen. Enjoyed it quite a bit.
Well, thank you. I probably could have gone all day with Fran. You know, he's got night stories for days, just funny ones. And so everybody always enjoys those. And wow, how versed on college basketball is he? He coached for as long as he did. And he's been an analyst. I did not realize he's been at ESPN for 21 years now. I'm like, there's no way. Wait. So, wow. And he really is locked into the game, knows what he's talking about.
No, it was funny. I was thinking about that. You know, there are certain people that have been just kind of a fixture in college basketball for most of my adult life. You think about guys like Dick Vitale, Fran's not far off there. He has been kind of omnipresent in the college basketball world, especially, post ESPN, when that really, brought the game to all of our living rooms at the same time, no matter what conference or region we lived in. So,
yeah, and Fran actually goes to more game because not just the analytics part, but going to watch things, going to the 3-on-3. Now he's the director of that, so he's involved there. His involvement in basketball is so much deeper than a lot of these other guys, so it allows him to stay more in tuned, I think, which is what makes that more enjoyable. Yes, John.
I think we've lost Chronic. We'll just have to wait and see if he pops back in. It's a little more difficult when it's somebody without a camera because we don't know whether or not they're frozen or not. But he'll join us back soon enough.
Absolutely. We'll get him back on. But yeah, I love having the folks like that on. That Chronic back with us. How are you, sir?
That was weird. I never I was listening to you the whole time.
I thought you may be, but perfect. But yeah,
nevertheless, I'm back.
Fran, it's just he's one of those guys that you mentioned Dick Vitale and all those guys, and Fran he's actually traveling more. I think he talks to more coaches. He's still engaged in the game at a different level, and obviously, if he is now the director of 3-on-3 basketball after being an analyst for 21 years, you would think that he has to have Just he's staying. He has 1 foot in the game, 1 more foot into the game, I guess you'd say. But very cool, and looking forward to getting him back on. Maybe I have to get him on with you sometime.
I do. I can listen to him talk for days. I don't know.
Well,
I bring a lot to that conversation.
Maybe we'll, I think you would be great. We'll have to do it with you next time.
No, it is, like I said, it was a treat listening to him. The thing about Fran is, for a lot of guys who have, retired from a coaching career and moved on into punditry, Fran certainly gives the aura, the credibility of a guy that's, not just sitting on his couch, not, refusing to leave the studio. He's in the gyms. He is all over the country. It seems like all the time, in season, off season, watching workouts, meeting with coaches, staffs. Thing that really strikes me, does a lot of mentoring with a lot of the young guys in the game, and perhaps that's because he has a son who's working his way up the ranks as well. But more than anything, I'm guessing probably just his commitment to giving back and continuing to contribute to the game and the growth of it. And you see that with the 3-on-3, which, like I said earlier, totally unaware of that, which is ironic because I just saw they won the Pan Am Cup men's and women's as one of the qualifiers for this. So super cool. Love seeing the growth of 3 versus 3 as well. We grew up seeing that, like Gus Macker.
I played a lot of it. Gus Macker, man.
Oh, brother, that was, growing up, that was a poor man's squad. If you couldn't get a 5v5 run, it made it so much more accessible to get some run in with just a couple of dudes. So to see that elevated now to the Olympic sport level, I think is awesome. And just really, really excited to see how that version of the game continues to grow. Because, you grew up in a small town. I grew up in a really small town. My high school had a class of about 98 people in it my freshman and sophomore year before I went to Culver. And, it can be tough to get a lot of people together, especially when you're spread out geographically and you don't have licenses and, you don't have shuttles to run you everywhere. So to see that now become an organized sport and a different version of basketball as we know it. It's a totally different game. It's much more exciting, fast paced. There's a lot more action in it. It's cool. And it's cool to see the U.S. Investing in it and pouring in the resources from a administrative as well as a talent standpoint in order to compete at the highest stage. So super cool.
One of my biggest regrets is along my many moves in doing and working this industry and whatnot, somewhere along the way, my Gus Macker trophy that I won in Wausau, Wisconsin disappeared. And damn it. The coolest thing is, back then, I remember we were told that those trophies were made by the same company that made the Oscars. So yeah, that's just a huge regret. I'd love to have that thing sitting behind me. Heisman talk. I want to bring that up just because my guy is still Michael Penix Jr. And now there's talk that J.J. McCarthy, if you look at some, is up and up. First of all, I say that's total BS. Michigan has played no one. I'm reading an article here. He had a huge game against rival Michigan State, 21 of 27 for 287 yards. I'm like, I don't care. Michael Penix Jr. is averaging like 340. Yeah, they had a down game last week, but that happens in conference. Then you add the fact of all of this that is coming out about Michigan, and forget sign stealing. They have been actually stealing information from teams. So that has got to have an impact on people's thoughts of him as a Heisman Trophy candidate when they already know a lot of what's going on. So there's so much there. But again, why is J.J. McCarthy being considered the top by anybody? Just because Michigan is having a good season, beating no one yet, his numbers don't even come close to what Michael Penix has done, and he beat a very good Oregon team. Yeah,
I don't quite get that, and I think you're spot on. I'm real curious to see how how the stain of all the controversy swirling around the big house affects that candidacy. Because make no mistake, you can be a top flight quarterback. You can be the best in the nation. But let's be honest, if you've got people on your staff and in your program that are actively subverting the game, stealing signs, stealing information, attacking unsportsmanlike conduct with an enthusiasm unknown to mankind, it's just it has to be reflected. There has to be that asterisk. I have a feeling as more information continues to flood out, because this is really a fire hose of just bad news for Michigan right now. There's going to have to be an effect on how those wins are perceived. I don't care that you just blank Michigan State. It's still a really, really bad look, and it's going to have to bring in question. All that said, though, there's still a whole lot of football left to be played. We know the voters have a recency bias. We know the voters have a team success bias. Ask Antoine Randall what it's like to be the best player in college basketball on a team that's not in the top 20, not in the now the college football playoff. We all know how that ends. There's a bias at play. So I think there's a lot of the season left to play out in determining where that trophy goes. I'll tell you this much: after watching Michael Penix's career to this point, I invite people to cast doubt on that kid and just see how he responds, because as he has done his entire career, his collegiate career, he's going to just embrace that adversity and find a way to overcome it. So it's been a bittersweet experience watching all the success he's having out in Washington right now, knowing he was ours and he's not anymore. So kudos to him. Tragic lesson for the Indiana football Hoosiers. But you know what? Everybody's talking about that $20 million mark right now. I'm talking about $124,000 difference. $124,000. That's the price tag that led to this. I went back and was looking at numbers. When we lost Greg Frey to Michigan, of all places, the O-line coach who had put a number of Hoosiers in the NFL, had really built that lineup into something that was worthy of competing in the Big Ten, and how quickly things slid since his departure. That was the difference between what we were paying him and what Michigan offered him in order to go up to Ann Arbor. So sometimes you just got to look at those investments, which is a whole nother ball of wax.
Yeah, that's I have said many times, it's not just look at the hires that were a lot of hires that were made and a lot of fires that were not made. That's where you have to go deeper into this whole thing, and you pointed that out. And what was I going to go to next? Do you think, or before I leave the Michigan thing alone, I'm wondering, will there be any impact on them this year? I mean, this is uncharted waters. This is in real time. Year. I mean, the Ohio State game is the first game. The Ohio State Penn State game was the first game their quote unquote covert operative did not attend the game that he bought tickets to because the story had broken. So I'm like, man, how do you not? There's no way I see you letting that go. But
no, and this is uncharted waters for the NCAA. They have very much signaled that the era of the major enforcement operations that retroactively punish current players for crimes that a program committed that they had no part of is over. And I think that's equitable. I think that's fair. All that said, though, with this whole scheme ongoing through this current season, it's really, really difficult to anticipate how they're going to handle this, because there's a mountain of tangible, credible, hard evidence showing exactly how this is working out, where it was happening. About the only thing they don't have are a mic on the sideline where he's relaying the signals that he's deciphered and passing that on to the coordinators. Although there's plenty of video of him with his stack of papers whispering in the coordinator's ear, as the sides are lining up for a snap. So it's it's going to be a hybrid case, the likes of which the NCAA hasn't had to deal with before, because while they've pivoted, to focusing on the wrongdoers rather than punishing the people currently on the roster, those are one and the same in this case, and it spans multiple seasons. And it's one of those situations where you can't say, and I don't think you'll ever be able to discern what impact it had on margins of victories, but you can't doubt that it gave them a competitive advantage. And while I know a lot of folks are really parsing this one up, Wolverine fans are all in a lather right now trying to defend yet another scandal from Harbaugh. Fact of the matter is, there's a reason that there is a hard red line when it comes to using technology, using in-person scouting to glean this type of information. And it's something they easily could have avoided had they just moved to the headsets and the helmets, and you do away with all the ridiculous signs and the gesturing and everything else. But that's not been done yet, and those aren't the rules we're currently playing under. And it's pretty unmistakable that they deliberately, willfully, wantonly violated the rules for an advantage against their opponents. And it cracks me up thinking that Michigan State is stealing signs from the IU sideline, like they would need any additional advantage in that situation, or against half of their competition for that matter, the majority of their competition. But that's just who Jim Harbaugh is, and that's who he's always been. And for all the jams he's been able to wiggle out of in his coaching career, it's going to be fascinating to see how this one affects him, because they've got him dead to rights on this one. And with the new interpretation of the rules, you don't have to prove that he knew, directed, instructed, was even aware of it. As the head coach of the program, he is ipso facto responsible for the malfeasance of his staff or those that they employed in furtherance of their schemes. So I have a feeling this one could bite Jim in the butt pretty good before it's all said and done, but we'll see whether or not it takes any dubs off the board this year.
Ipso facto. I love that. Reminds me of Horrible Bosses every time I hear it. It is a great reference. Switching gears, everyone complaining about IU football, of course, and Tom Allen. There's lots of complaints about his tenure and the $20 million buyout that remains. And people say, "Oh, do this, do this." It's a $20 million buyout, people. And if I'm Tom Allen, I'm not walking away from a $20 million buyout. I'm like, I'll take the check and leave if you want me to. And I don't know that has there ever been a negotiated pre-settlement in college football history where like, hey man, we've got to work something out. I don't know if that happens, if Indiana would do that, but there are definite problems like they have been many times. But right now the IU football program is trending in the wrong direction.
Well, and right now they are in the same position they were a couple years ago. Where they're having to look to boosters, to donors, to their own budget, trying to figure out how you come up with 8 figures to make a problem of your own creation go away. And that's not a position that Indiana has historically wanted to put itself in, has been willing to put itself in. With the Archie Miller buyout and the hiring of Mike Woodson, that was probably the most significant cash call in program history, short of a capital project, to deal with a personnel issue. And now you're looking at but it was basketball. So everybody said, of course you do it. You say you care so much about it. You spend at the top of the nation when it comes to the resources you pump into that program. That's just what a responsible, serious program does when it feels like it has no other choice. In the football situation, let's be honest, IU football has not historically proven to be a responsible, serious program. And now, due to the contract that they and the extension and the raise they gave Tom Allen after the COVID season, they very much have a big boy problem on their hands. You have a massive buyout. You have results that aren't improving, that are only regressing. And now you have some really, really hard choices to make. as far as what direction you want to go with. And not the least of which is considering how you handle this situation, and that affects your next situation. What that does to your applicant pool going forward. It's just really an unenviable position for Scott Dolson, all the leaders at IU, trying to figure out how to handle this, because quite honestly, things ain't getting better. The more this slides, the harder it is to fix it and to bring it back up. But the only thing is, the longer you wait, the lower the buyout number becomes. And this is really one of those that it's just unenviable in every imaginable way, because there's no easy answers. There's no good answers. By all accounts, Tom Allen is a good man. You don't like to see good men get let go.
Exactly.
You don't like to see them get drugged through the mud. And right now, Tom Allen is probably rightfully getting drugged for the performance of his football team. To go from a top 15 program to 2 wins over the course of 3 seasons is just really a astronomical cratering, the likes of which you just don't see across sports, because there are safety nets in place. There's institutional features in place that prohibit that type of thing. And I think it shows just how fragile IU's ascent was in getting into that realm that they had so briefly tasted. And then it all comes crashing back down. So I don't know where you go from here. I know it's not going to be easy. It's certainly not going to be cheap, and it's not going to feel good. And I don't care what side of the fence you're on this one. Nothing about this feels good. I've kind of taken a social media break, and one of the things that I've really enjoyed about it is I don't feel compelled to weigh in on this, because you step back and it doesn't feel good. No matter how right it feels to say it, it still doesn't feel good, because these are real people with real families and, real careers on the line. But at the end of the day, it's a cold, hard game. And the scoreboard is what the scoreboard says, and it's not good for the Hoosiers.
Absolutely. Chronic Hoosier, thank you, sir. I appreciate you, brother. We'll talk to you next week.
Be well, guys. Take care.
We've got to take a quick break. Indiana Sports Beat back with more right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Wow Food Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
I know. Great problem to have. It just cracks me up. All I ever think when this happens is I think about all those times when I wish that this was the problem. You know what I'm saying?
Well, not having too many guests is the problem. It's the fact that there was no reason to ask one more question. That was the only thing.
It's just the content is.
Yeah, that's fine.
It's when I was talking about when not too many guests, but when the content is just great from start to finish, it's like, damn.
Yeah, all you'll need to do here is recap the day and wrap it up.
I know. Oh, I know. What a great one. Holy. Fran he might be the greatest one-off guest of all time.
Definitely one of the best one-offs since I've been around, for sure.
It doesn't mean the most well-known. Dickie V, was on a couple times, and so that that's its own self. But as far as actual engaging and fun,
he seemed like he was enjoying himself for sure.
That was just it wasn't like definitely different than having Jay Billis on. Let's say.
I thought Jay Billis was good too, though. Both times.
Well, he's great himself. The first time I had him on,
that was before I was around.
Yeah, he was not happy. It was like he answered the phone and that was a different time. I will say that. Billy Hahn from Mishawaka. There, man, a lot of Indiana mentions without even purposely. Scott Drew.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Robert, that is. I've long said Indiana has to stop.
Well, remember, we always say one season with this. He had 2 good seasons. Everyone forgets the 8-4 year before COVID. No one ever mentions that year. They only mention the 2020 year.
Well,
the extension came after 2020.
That was the Kalen DeBoer year.
Was Kalen DeBoer not on 2020 staff?
No, that was Nick Sheridan. They had a good season, a follow-up, but during the COVID. And COVID definitely played a part in that. But as much as I have blamed Nick Sheridan before, I don't think it was his fault. I've been.
All right, here we go. Quick wrap up.
824-4040. The Golf Club.
Not even going to play the liner.
This segment is brought to you by Reynolds Family Dentistry in Sellersburg.
Hey, welcome back. Indiana Sports Beat Radio on this Tuesday, October 24th. I cannot thank everybody for being along. Our good buddies at Reynolds Family Dentistry down in Sellersburg. Keep that championship smile. Go see Dr. J. Big thanks to Mike DeCourcy, Fran, Fraschilla. Huge thanks. What a fun show that was. Of course, Chronic Hoosier. John, the producer, for keeping us between the white lines. And most importantly, as always, every single one of you. Without you, we've got no reason to be here. We're back tomorrow to do this all again. Make sure you come back and join us. Until then, I'm Jim Coyle. I will see you on the radio.
Thanks for listening to Indiana Sports Beat Radio. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube page for more clips and team coverage of Indiana basketball, football, and more. You can also find full episodes and tons of other content on thehoosier.com. We'll see you next time for another edition of Indiana Sports Beat Radio.